kept secrets. It kind of just is what it is. But more generally speaking, I don't understand why we're going so far down this rabbit hole of would've, could've, should've. The people, look, let's say something very simple here. The people who said that Donald Trump's involvement in the 37-hour operation of the B-2 bombers flying from Missouri to Iran and back with not a single shot fired at our boys. By the way, as I said, that was partially due to the fact that the IDF had so neutralized the Iranian Air Force and their defenses there. So the fact that he was able to accomplish that so amazingly there, we should have seen that coming, because it was actually pretty easily foreseeable. And the people who did not see that coming are the people who have lost credibility to comment, frankly, on these affairs. People who warned about thousands and thousands and thousands of dead American lives, who said that China and Russia would swoop in and that this would be World War III. Well, you know what? God bless you all, because you apparently survived World War III. It was the shortest World War III of all of our lifetimes.
I didn't say any of that. So what are you...
Dave, I restrained Josh. Josh, keep going.
Again, this is the Donald Trump foreign policy doctrine in action. It is quick surgical strikes. Roger Stone was talking about it earlier. It's exactly right. He is not a neocon. Neoconservatism, bad. Isolationism, also naive and stupid. Donald Trump agrees with both those things. The nationalist, realist, MAGA, America First approach to foreign policy is to have strong nationalist allies that are generally capable of securing and patrolling their own regions in a way that redounds not merely to the allies' national interests, but also to the American national interest. That is exactly what Israel has been doing for 40, 50 years, as they have taken out Islamists and Sharia supremacist thugs in Gaza, in Yemen, Hezbollah. I mentioned Fuad Shakur, the Hezbollah jihadi who killed 241 Marines in Beirut, Lebanon, 1983. There's a million examples there. That is the definition of an America First ally, and what just happened in the 12-day war is an encapsulation of the America First Trump doctrine, that in this case, this tag team between the U.S. and Israel against the mutual threat of Iran in action.
Okay, so I want to now move, because it's important, but it's connected. So I think we have on full display a difference of opinion on the 12-day war. Now let's go to the next one. It's inferred in both of these points, but you only get to answer it as yes or no one at a time. Is Israel an ally of the United States?
Yes, of course.
No.
Okay, so now we have disagreement. We're going to now figure that out. And then I want to, then indicated in that is Israel influencing American politics? So I'm going to start with Josh, and then we'll go back to Dave. You say Israel is an ally. Spend a minute on that, and then address how some people have concerns that Israel is influencing the U.S. government, and then I'll allow Dave to have some time. Josh.
All right, there's multiple reasons why Israel is an ally. First and foremost, I think most people in this room are believers of some stripe, right? I am Jewish. Most of you are probably Christians, and God bless you for that. If you have any attachment whatsoever to the holy sites, if you have any attachment whatsoever to this narrow strip of land between the river and the sea, as the Hamas propagandists call it, then you're going to have some reason to care about this particular sliver of land. That's point number one. Let's just kind of get it out there, especially if you understand that we in Western civilization are fundamentally at war with barbarism, barbarism being best represented by the Islamists and Sharia supremacists. When you understand that Western civilization really just is the Bible, there is a special calling to have an ally with a certain part of the Middle East. That's point one. Point two is just the Islamist deterrent point, Charlie, which is that America has faced jihadism time and time again, going back for 40, 50 years. 9/11, obviously the most tragic example. We just saw it again on the streets of Bourbon Street in New Orleans on January 1st, just a few months ago there. If you care about deterring Islamism from conquering Western civilization, a point that you have very astutely been talking about a lot recently on your TV hits and on social media, a very, very important point. If you care about defending Western civilization from the barbarians, you absolutely have to place a special premium on this particular relationship. And then third is that if you actually care as I do, paradoxically, I actually care a lot about China. In fact, I think that America's by far #1 biggest threat this century is China. If you care about effectuating this broader pivot to the Indo-Pacific, as American foreign policy people have been talking about for 20, 30 years now, you have to have some way of stabilizing the Middle East. The way to do that is not to just adopt the stupid and asinine Barack Obama foreign policy of appeasing America's enemies. And the way to do that is to embolden your allies. Again, that is the Trump doctrine.
So we didn't get to the second part of the question. So do you want to just start on the ally, and then we'll do... Yeah. You can incorporate both, Dave. He had 2 answers in a row, so take 3 to 4 minutes.
Well, look, this idea that the great battle of our time is us versus the Islamists, us versus these barbarians, that's really the problem here in the United States of America. Lebanon, that's what you got to worry about. Listen, I think everyone here, all you guys should know this at this point. Our problem in America is the deep state of the United States of America, okay? They're the ones who framed Donald Trump for treason. His own intelligence agencies framed the sitting US president. And you know what that deep state wants, by the way? Permanent war. That's what they always want. That's how they and their friends make their money. And so all of this talk is just so ridiculous, man. I mean, this talk about how, like, if you care about the holy sites in Israel, like, okay, sure. Obviously, Christians and Jews and Muslims have a connection to that land. But that doesn't mean we have to bomb Iran for Israel.
Who's saying that?
That doesn't... Well, we just bombed Iran. That was the first topic. Oh, okay. Okay. Anyway, it doesn't mean that we have to support Israel slaughtering people in Gaza. None of that has anything to do with the holy sites. And in fact, a lot of sites get destroyed when there's bombs flying. But listen, the real problem for America, if you want to even talk about like the Islam taking over America or taking over Europe, well, how did that happen? That happened because we completely destabilized the region, fighting war after war after war that did nothing but slaughter hundreds of thousands of people. And then our Western governments had the most insane open immigration policy that was basically suicidal. We're doing this to ourselves. We're $37 trillion in debt, and we're looking for another enemy to go fight. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, we've spent $20 trillion on empire and wars. And you know what? We can't tax enough money to pay for it. We can't borrow enough money to pay for it. So what do? We print the money. And now you guys are coming out into the world and you're wondering why you're 6 figures in debt from college and you're getting a job at DoorDash and the average house goes for $800,000 because we've destroyed the currency chasing these monsters that were never any threat to our country.
So
listen, one quick point. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis couldn't bring down America. Joseph Stalin and the commies couldn't bring down America. The British Empire couldn't bring down America. But you think the Hezbollah in Lebanon are a threat to us? They're a problem for Israel to deal with. We
Say
got
that
our
to
own
the families
problems.
of the Beirut barracks bombing in 1983. Seriously, say that to them. Have you spoken to the families of the people who have been killed in 1983 in Beirut, Lebanon, the people who have been killed by those IEDs in Iraq that you're just casually dismissing? Have you actually spoken to any of these families?
First of all, yes, I have.
The 9/11 families, any of them?
Yes, I have.
Are you aware of Iran's involvement in 9/11?
Yeah, okay. So you're just asking me questions over
Guys,
my attempt to answer them. Stupid.
This is why I'm here. So, right? Why don't we both just take a deep breath, because they want to see a debate where they can make their mind up. They don't want to see interruptive stuff, okay? That's why this is going to be a different type of discussion. So, let me both steelman your both arguments. You have to answer to me, okay? So, Josh, well, actually to Dave first and then to Josh. Josh is saying, what about all of the Islamist death that they're responsible for? Beirut bombings. You mentioned the Shiite. That's basically the essence of your argument, right, Josh? By saying, did you talk to, he's saying, why are you minimizing this? That would be Josh's contention. Is that fair, Josh?
And 9/11, there's so many examples.
Right. Dave, respond to that, and then I will throw it back to Josh.
Well, I certainly don't think I in any way minimized any of those deaths. I made the point that Ronald Reagan still sold weapons to Iran a couple years after that, and I made the point that those roadside weapons were built in Iraq by Shiites there. That's not minimizing it. This is a huge part of the reason why we never should have invaded Iraq to begin with, because we get our bravest young boys killed. It's tens of thousands of them have committed suicide in the last few years, and that doesn't seem to stop anyone from wanting to pursue the next attack. So the point is, right, that I think if we want to really understand this stuff, it's wise to look at what some of the motivating factors for the hatred against us is. All you got to do is listen. Yes, I have talked actually to families of people who have died in Iraq. You know what? Overwhelmingly, they're non-interventionist, anti-war people now. In fact, did you know that in 2008 and in 2012, Dr. Ron Paul got more money from active duty military than all the other candidates combined, including Barack Obama, because the the active duty military are actually the ones who are the most hardcore
So
anti-war
again,
so don't invoke them to try to sell another war,
but Dave, I'm going to follow up with a tough question. I want you to make the case, because I don't want to have you be able to get past this. You say Israel is not an ally. That is not an opinion that people hear a lot. Why is that?
Look, all I'm saying is Israel has at every turn, and look, again, when I say Israel, I'm talking about the government of Israel. I'm not talking about the people there. And I'm specifically talking about Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party, who have been in control for most of this time, for most of my lifetime. Yeah, and right, most of the 21st century. And so when I say they have been constantly pushing America toward more aggressive policies, toward getting in more fights. And just like I always say, if you went out to the bar every single night with your friend, and every night your friend's trying to convince you to get into a fight, and while you're beating a lot of people up, you're also taking a lot of wounds, and you're going to jail, and you're getting in trouble, you got to stop hanging out with that friend. And so I think that my position, I don't believe in wars of aggression and wars of choice. I don't believe in sanctions. I don't believe in that. We should be friends with Israel. We should trade with Israel and have a good relationship with them. But you know what? I also don't believe in welfare, and they shouldn't get another dime of U.S. taxpayer money, and they should not.
So
hold on. Their lobby should register as a foreign
That's a good
agent,
segue. Finish that.
And they should stop blackmailing our politicians.
Got it. So back to Josh. Dave had some uninterrupted time there. Let's now address that, because, again, there's a text chain. I have all the text to prove it. Everyone knew where this debate was going, right, Dave? There's been no surprises. Josh, you knew that there are some concerns, and Dave mentioned it, such as, I think you're saying AIPAC. Is that correct?
Well, the broader Israel lobby,
fine.
but that's certainly part of it.
Can you address this, Josh?
Yeah.
Because this is a question people are confused about. Take 2 to 3 minutes on this, and then build out the ally Israel at the end of it. But Josh, Dave is making a point I'd like you to respond to.
Okay, so first of all, I'm not a fan of AIPAC. I donated once to AIPAC, $54, like a decade ago, and I basically got swindled into doing it. So I'm not a fan of AIPAC. But AIPAC is not this nefarious boogeyman that Dave Smith and people make it out to be. It stands for America-Israel Political Action Committee. It is a group of Americans who place a premium on the U.S.-Israel relationship the same way that the NRA is a group of Americans who place a premium on the Second Amendment. I do too. I'm a concealed carry kind of guy myself. Same way that there are any number of other lobby groups that support any number of other things. By the way, there's also similar groups similar to AIPAC for American citizens to support U.S. relations with other foreign countries. Funny how these other groups never get brought up in this debate. For instance, anyone who's been to Glendale, California, you've probably heard folks in ANCA. That's the Armenian National Committee of America, a very loud, active group in Washington, D.C. Perhaps more nefariously, there is the NIAC, the National Iranian American Council. It's funny how in these debates, when you talk about various American citizens who get involved to lobby or to express their political opinion, as the First Amendment gives you the right to do, because they think that the U.S. national interest is served by allying with a certain country, it's funny, and perhaps a little worse than funny, how the whole register as a foreign agent talking point comes up only in one context and one context only, which is AIPAC. Look, the notion, Charlie, that AIPAC, which again I'm not a fan of, I have literally, I'm not a fan of AIPAC.
Why are you not a fan of it?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of AIPAC for the reason that I'm just about to give, actually, which is that AIPAC exists, their raison d'etre, their entire purpose for existing is to secure large-scale annual appropriations, currently about $3.8 billion annually, in U.S. aid to Israel. I'm not a particularly big fan of foreign aid in general, and I've been arguing for literally a decade that the U.S. should wind down foreign aid to Israel in particular. I think it actually is a bad idea for both countries.
Do we have agreement on that?
Yeah.
If you want to wind it down to zero tomorrow, we have agreement on that.
It can't be tomorrow,
but yes,
because
I'd support winding it down.
So we have
too.
agreement on an
Yes.
end point?
Yes, sure.
Okay, keep going, Josh.
Yeah, so you obviously, yeah.
Oh, you guys are good people. They just cheered for agreement. I like
Yeah,
this
so
crowd.
That's the point. We're not here just to hurl insults.
Yeah.
You could do that online. This is here to actually have some sort of We're a nation. These are our fellow citizens. We got to figure this stuff out. Josh, keep going.
Yeah, so you obviously can't do it tomorrow because that would be to betray an ally in the middle of a hot war. That would send a terrible signal to other allies, Saudis, Emiratis, you name it. So you can't do it tomorrow. But I do agree that you should have a game plan, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it is. I don't really care. Honestly, get a game plan in place to phase out this aid. It's not good for the United States. It's crony capitalism, Eisenhower defense industrial complex, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. All of that is totally true. And then from Israel's perspective, it's also bad for them too, because it makes them overly reliant. It actually ends up undermining the entire notion of Zionism, the notion that the Jews should control their own right to their own existence in their own homeland. It undermines Zionism in the long run. So it's actually bad for both countries. But Charlie, this notion that AIPAC is this big, powerful lobby can be dispelled with literally one anecdote. And I only need one anecdote to dispel this oft-repeated notion, which is the entire 2014 to 2015 Barack Obama-Iran nuclear debate. The fact that the JCPOA, Barack Obama's Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action nuclear deal passed, is literally the singular data point that disproves the entire alleged existence of the nefarious Israel lobby that controls all politicians there. They failed epically to get that passed. But I do have a question, Charlie, for Dave there, which is...
I will translate it.
Okay. Well, Charlie, I would be very, very curious, based on Dave's recent tweets about Donald Trump doing XYZ things, whether it's covering up for a pedophile ring or engaging in foreign wars, all on behest of a foreign power. Does Dave actually think that Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and the entire Trump administration are literally bought off by the Jews? Is that actually your honest stance?
Okay, so what Josh is asking...
Well, first... yeah. Well,
is
first
what he
off,
just said.
well, it's always, look, all of this, I mean,
and I do
literally...
have a tough follow-up for you.
No, but I'm
Please
sorry,
answer.
but just like everything you just said, like all of it, I just find to be like the cheapest debate tactics. First off, I never said anyone's bought off by the Jews. We're both Jewish, and that's a dirty little trick you play when I'm talking about...
I'm the only non-Jewish guy on stage.
Well, I'm talking about a foreign... Yeah, I'm talking about a foreign government, and then you kind of imply, and no, again, this is all just straw man. It's this whole thing of like Dave saying AIPAC is this big bad monster that controls everything.
You just said foreign agents.
Hold on. Therefore, if I have one data point of where a policy that AIPAC didn't want gets through, that disproves the whole narrative. And then this distraction with talking about the Armenian lobby or this other, it's like, yeah, well, if we were having a discussion about that, maybe that would come up. But we're talking about this. And to compare AIPAC to the NRA, who, by the way, are kind of sellouts and don't go nearly far enough. But,
I agree with that.
like, I'm a hardcore gun rights guy.
We got more agreement.
Yeah.
We love our guns,
Yeah.
don't we, everybody?
Yeah. No, you know the NRA guys who always go, the key is to enforce existing gun laws. No, the key is to repeal every last one of the existing gun. There should be one law, the Second Amendment. That's the law. Okay, but all that, no, it is totally different to have a group of Americans advocating for a constitutionally protected natural right for American citizens than to have a group of Americans advocating for a foreign government in conjunction with that foreign government. That's a different
not what's
thing.
happening.
And to even, let me finish, Josh, and to even compare them is ridiculous. And listen, by the way, I'll just say this. Every single person in this room, you have to hate AIPAC. You don't even have a choice. You're here at Turning Point USA. AIPAC contributes millions of dollars to woke progressive Democrats if they support Israel. In other words, it's okay to destroy our country as long as that helps Israel. So I'm sorry, I don't know, Turning Point USA, this is my first time here. Quick question, are we allowed to support groups that contribute millions of dollars to woke progressive Democrats? Because I thought the answer was no.
So Josh, and then Dave, I'm going to have a tough follow-up for you, so take a drink of water. Josh, what would you say to that? Because, look, I wouldn't, some people would ask the question, okay, does AIPAC have more power than like your traditional like Armenian lobby? But more broadly, let's just take it more broadly. Like, is there any concern that, or how would you address the concern? Let me put it this way. How would you address the concern that some people have that a foreign government tends to have an outsized amount of platform in the U.S. government?
Charlie, I think that there are tens, if not hundreds of millions of Americans who care a lot about U.S. relations with the state of Israel for understandable reasons. This literally goes back, by the way, those of you who are familiar with your American history, this literally goes back to the American founding. The American founders were extremely, extremely eloquent and outspoken about this. From George Washington to John Adams to Hamilton to Abraham Lincoln's famous February 1861 speech referring to Americans as an almost chosen people, they quoted the Hebrew Bible over and over and over again. They understood that the Christianity upon which America is predicated is not exclusively, but has a lot of Old Testament Hebrew Bible emphasis therein. And that's been part of our Constitution, part of our legal code, part of our moral code since day one. So it is completely reasonable for people in the year 2025 to look at that, to look at all the other things we talked about when it comes to deterring Islamism and Sharia supremacism, when it comes to trying to achieve this Abraham Accord-style nationalist, realist foreign policy, when it comes to deterring the Iranian regime and their various proxies. It's very, very understandable for American citizens, again, Americans, to look at that and to conclude that we have important reasons for allying with Israel. They are not doing so on behalf of a foreign government. This framing is absurd. It's utterly absurd. They are doing so because they are patriotic Americans, and they feel it is their subjective sense that as patriotic Americans that this alliance is furthered.
And they are U.S. passport holders. Some
Yes,
people think that they're strictly foreign nationals. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's just simply just not true. Now, again, I say that by way of someone who's been very critical of AIPAC, but it's just simply not true.
We're using that as a filler term. So now, Dave, for you, two quick ones. Do you think that the Council for American Islamic Relations should register as a foreign agent?
Yeah, I don't think there should be any groups advocating on behalf of foreign governments.
You're being consistent.
Yeah,
great.
That's right.
Secondly, though, and Josh did not say this, but he laced it in through one of the salvos he said, Dave, you're accusing them of being bought by the Jews. Now, Dave, there is a rise of, I just think, some disgusting stuff online. I'm not blaming you for this. I'm not one of those people, right? But what do you have to say that there's this dark Jew hate out there? And you see it and I see it. I hate it. It's not good.
Yeah.
And everyone in this audience, guys, don't get yourself involved in that. I'm telling you, it will rot your brain. It's bad for your soul. It's bad. It's evil. I think it's demonic. And so, Dave, though, how do you navigate being critical of a foreign government while also, some people say, well, your fans hate Jews. You're not responsible for your fans. That is dumb. That is terrible. I don't believe that. At the same time, though, Dave, you have a big responsibility on your shoulders, right? Because you're saying something that is heterodox, not in popular opinion, that some people are trying to use to push a much more sinister agenda.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I think that the fact is that the policies that the U.S. government is pursuing are almost guaranteed to create this. And look, I think there's a lot of factors here. I don't have nearly enough time to kind of give all of my thoughts on this, but I think as you young people know, right, even though kind of over the last year with Trump's victory, wokeism has been receding, at least to some degree, it really can't be overstated how much every institution in American life bought into racialism over the last 15 years. And it's like these young kids came up in an environment where that was just considered normal. Like, you judge people by their race and make racialist arguments. And yes, now that has also been embraced by some people on the right. I will say that I think the best thing to always do in these situations is tell the truth, try to be a good person, try to deliver your message in the most compelling way, and let the chips fall where they may. But I do think that the level of Israeli control over our politics is frankly pretty undeniable, as much as people try to. Look, just think one example, right, of this. So Donald Trump, you remember at the end of the 12-day war when Donald Trump starts pushing for a ceasefire, and then what does Israel do? They come in and start bombing regime targets, not nuclear sites. They come in and start bombing, and then Donald Trump was furious with Netanyahu. Obviously, he had his most angry moment toward Netanyahu when he said, they both don't know what the F they're doing.
I kind of loved that moment, for the record.
Yeah.
I loved it.
I loved that moment too. But then the next day, he's right back to just advocating that they drop the charges against Netanyahu. He's still going to continue funding Netanyahu unconditionally. Anyone else, Donald Trump, would have come up with a nickname for him already and just been smashing him all over the place. He was trying to lure America into a war that Donald Trump didn't want to get into. But then we still got to.
He did because he literally chose to get involved. That was Donald Trump's decision.
Right, but it was also his decision.
The Israelis had a backup plan.
Right, but it was also his decision to push for a ceasefire and to try to end the thing.
And Israel agreed immediately.
Well, no, they bombed the crap out of him immediately. That's why Trump was so upset.
Simple question. I want to phase out U.S. aid to Israel, okay? I established that. Allegedly, Prime Minister Netanyahu is now getting on board with that as well. Certainly a lot of people in his coalition, too.
I'll believe that when I see it.
Well, he's basically said that, so you should believe it. But what exactly...
A politician saying something...
Let Josh finish his question.
You should believe
Dave,
it.
let Josh finish his question.
If the Israeli government were to agree that that is the best policy, and if the United States were to do that, then what in God's name is your actual problem?
Well, I'm sorry. So if America was not propping up Israel and America was not...
If we wind down the foreign aid, then what is your issue?
Well, there's other military intervention, obviously, so I'm not sure I follow. I'd be very happy to wind down the foreign aid. But other than that, what is my... Listen, I'm a non-interventionist, so I'm not saying America should get involved. But no, I mean, I do think objectively what Israel's doing to Gaza is horrible. I think...
And I want to talk about Gaza.
They couldn't do it without us.
So make that
but
case.
If they were, I would still be against that.
We have to go fast because people have flights and stuff, but I want to get to this, right? And we still haven't gotten to the final conclusion. So let's talk Gaza, because first I want to go, Josh, on October 7th, because I want you to remind people what happened on October 7th. And Dave, I'll be honest, I think your portion of the debate, your portion of your community could do a better job of remembering the horror on October 7th. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not putting that on you. I'm saying just your community. But I'm going to have,
okay.
That's just me. I want you just to think, because I think we kind of forget, because there was something unique and terrible. Josh, I want you to talk about that. And then I want you to make the best case you can, because every human being's made in the image of God. I don't like seeing dead kids anywhere. I don't like seeing dead kids in Gaza. I don't like it. So we're Christians here. So Josh, I want you to kind of walk us through the series of events, because it can't be lost on us. Talk about Gaza. Talk about the horror of October 7th. Then, Dave, I want you to talk about your criticism about Gaza. And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up, Dave, about something that happened from the Joe Rogan show. Josh, you first.
I'm just curious. Has anyone just put your hand up and make some noise? Have you been, any of you, to the parts of Israel that were slaughtered by Hamas? Anyone? All right, a few people. Okay. So I was also there a few months after it happened. If you haven't been there, it's very difficult to describe what you see. You see these kibbutzim, these small villages. By the way, these were typically left-wingers. These were peaceniks that were establishing their villages on the border to try to engage in pen pal diplomacy, if you will, with the Arabs of Gaza. These are very kind of left-wing peacenik people. And you see just kitchenware throughout the streets, teddy bears everywhere, blood-stained walls, bullet holes as far as the eye can see. It's very difficult to describe. The only time that I had that similar feeling walking around places like Kfar Aza was when I was in Treblinka, the Nazi concentration camp itself. So, look, in total, and there's a brand new report talking about the extent of the mass raping and sexual violence that Hamas committed on October 7th, combined, you're looking at roughly 1,200 people slaughtered. By the way, not all Israeli nationals. Dozens of Americans were either murdered or taken hostage in Gaza as well. In total, something like 40 to 50 different nationalities were represented of those who were slaughtered on October 7th. In fact, just looking at it from a very strictly, narrowly American perspective, October 7th amounted on its own terms to the largest American-only hostage crisis since Tehran in 1979, because of all the American citizens who were then taken hostage into Gaza. So it was an unspeakable atrocity. We don't really have all the answers to this day as to how it happened. Perhaps we never will. I certainly hope to get some clarity at some point there. But it was the single deadliest day for the Jewish people since World War II. And given Israel's small size, it's roughly the equivalent of 45 to 50 9/11s, if you can possibly contextualize that. So that was what precipitated this war. And it was a war that Israel, Charlie, did not want, as you know. Hamas took over in 2007. Israel repeatedly, time and time again, decided not to try to topple Hamas under the idea that you could potentially have an even worse alternative, better to deal with the devil that you know, and so forth there. October 7th, I think extremely reasonably, given the sheer level of carnage and terror and just outright satanic, demonic evil that happened, they quite reasonably concluded that policy simply had to end. And what's happened in Gaza for the past year and a half, almost 2 years now, has been a protracted war in one of the most condensed urban environments in the world. It is very, 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 very difficult war-fighting conditions. I would like to remind you just of at least one or two very simple facts. One is that let's not forget that Hamas, who Israel is at war against in Gaza, is a U.S.-recognized foreign terrorist organization. They are indistinguishable in that respect from Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of these other foreign terrorist organizations. They are a rabid jihadist network that, like all these other jihadis and Sharia supremacists, also wants to kill not merely Jews, but Christians and all infidels. They say that very clearly in the 1987 founding charter. That is point number one. Point number two, Charlie, you mentioned that this is a very Christian audience. I am Jewish. We happen to share most of the Bible. And I am a firm believer in Genesis 1:27, that we are all made in God's image. That is one of my foundational beliefs in everything. I write about this at great length in my book, Israel and Civilization. To me, that's the single foundational ethical imperative of all of Western civilization. It informs my pro-life views and so much else. So I, like you and like so many others, also weep whenever innocent people are dead. There are 2 points to make, and I'll make them very briefly because I know I'm sensitive to time. One is that we know, because we actually have people like John Spencer, the head of urban warfare studies at West Point, who have actually been able to crunch numbers. We know that when you actually look at the civilian to combatant death ratios in Gaza, it is the most humane civilian to combatant death ratio in the entire history of urban warfare. John Spencer was there, by the way, in 2016, 2017 in Fallujah, Iraq, during the Trump-led ISIS counterinsurgency. The United States Army, God bless them, did not even do quite as well as the IDF in terms of civilian to combatant death ratio, according to John Spencer of West Point. Point number two, which is a very simple point that Dave Smith and his friends always like to look over, is that when you're just trying to ascribe moral culpability to every single tragic death in Gaza, Charlie, you made this point so well in your recent debates over in England against these highfalutin British faux intellectuals at Cambridge and Oxford, when you said that the moral culpability comes to people who are using human shields. That is just how it works. That is the law of war. That is the law of combat. That is just basic morality and logic 101. So that is essentially how I see Gaza.
I know Dave has plenty to say in response to that. So Dave, take 2 minutes, and then I have a crisp follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, geez, there's a lot there. First of all, look, if you support what Israel's doing in Gaza right now, I would just, like, my advice to you guys is just know that you never have a leg to stand on claiming to be pro-life for the rest of your life. Just saying that. If you... Oh, so it's okay to support a policy.
Let's not boo our speaker,
It's
Dave.
okay to support a
Make your
policy
message.
that is killing babies. All of a sudden, killing babies is negotiable. All right, fine. I'm just reading the room.
So, Dave, why don't you...
No, I'm not talking about for Hamas.
Hold on.
Human
Back
shields,
up.
dude.
Human
shields.
Hold on. Back up. Dave, why don't...
I just let you go
Dave,
on this whole long
I know.
thing.
I'm going to actually
like,
help you out
yeah.
here, Dave, okay? What I'm doing is I want you to tell the audience what's going on in Gaza, because some people in the audience don't know what's going on. So don't assume they know, and let's not get back...
Oh, okay. Well, I did assume that most people know that lots of babies are being killed in Gaza, but maybe I shouldn't have assumed that.
Don't be sarcastic about it, Dave. Instead, I mean this. Because
no, I meant that
not
literally. I did
an
assume
information
that.
loop where they're on social media all the time, okay? So walk through numbers, walk through what animates you to say something like that.
Well, okay. Well, let me respond to a few of the things that Josh claimed. I mean, if you want to go, there was just a major report a couple weeks ago in Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, where they had a bunch of IDF soldiers. They actually had one who went on record who was saying that they were ordered to shoot at crowds of people who were going into
blood libel left-wing filth, by the way.
Josh, I let you talk. Let's please let Dave make his case.
Well, is the IDF soldier who went on the record also filth?
Probably.
Okay. All right, there you go. So if there, see, you're, whatever, that's when you'll criticize the IDF. Look, Josh is just lying when he says that Israel supported Hamas for all those years because they feared there might be a worse alternative. It's just not true. And this has been so widely reported. You don't have to rely on Haaretz. You can rely on all types of reporting, or you can just look at all of the leaders in their own words, what they said. They chose, Netanyahu, and this was very controversial in Israel. There were lots of critics of this. Netanyahu thought he had this brilliant idea, which is that he would prop up Hamas and keep them in power. His exact quote was, "We can control the height of the flame." So he was like, we'll keep these terrorists in power, and that way we can tell the entire international community that, look, we have no partner for peace. We have no one to deal with here. And that way we never have to negotiate with the Palestinians. This was the game that he played, and it blew up in his face and really blew up in the Israeli people's face on October 7th. And I've never downplayed October 7th. I don't know. I know, but I'm just making the point that I never have.
Thank you for that, because what happened there is totally evil.
You don't have to downplay any of that. And in fact, I've criticized many other critics of Israel who have downplayed that. It was a horrible day. Awful, atrocious acts were committed by Hamas terrorists. But at the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu was propping those guys up. In fact, according to the Israeli former defense secretary, he sent the head of the Mossad to Qatar to, quote, beg them to continue shipping the money in. Meanwhile, they had a blockade around Gaza. They wouldn't let sugar, they wouldn't let potatoes in, because they claim that's dual use. That could be used to build rockets. So the kids can't get, food. Yet hundreds of millions of dollars in cash directly to Hamas. I guess money doesn't have a dual use. So, the whole mission of this, what you can't even really call a war, because it's not a war, it's the destruction of a captive people. Gaza's been occupied since 1967 by the Israelis.